Today is Sunday, December 22nd, 2013, and we are interviewing Mr. Robert Reel at Athens, Illinois. Mr. Reel was born on February 8th, 1931. My name is Cheryl Walker, and I'll be interviewing Mr. Reel. Mr. Reel, could you state for the record what war and branch of service you served in?
I was in the Korean War, and I was in the Army.
Okay. And what was your highest rank?
Staff Sergeant.
Okay. What years of service were you? What years did you join the service?
Well, I joined in 50, then I had to go over Korea in 50, March or April of 52 till October of 53. And then my ETS time was coming up, so they shipped me back home.
Okay. Did you enlist into the service?
I joined the National Guard. And my serial number is NG 26373448. I don't think I'll never forget it, I hope.
Did you, so you had joined the National Guard, and why did you join the National Guard?
Well, I was going to be drafted in January of 1950, so I joined the Guard, and I got to stay home. I was a farmer and got to stay home in 1950 and farm. Then they activated the Illinois 44th National Guard unit, and then we went to school, and then we went to Camp Cook, California. That's where we shipped out of.
So when you joined the National Guard, what was your MOS?
Weapons. MOS, oh dear. What was that? Infantry all the way on everything. And then they sent us to Fort Benning, Georgia, and we qualified on every weapon that the Army uses. And that took about, eight months or better.
How did you find out that you were going to be sent over to Korea?
Well, we was in California, Camp Cook, and orders come down that our unit was being sent to Korea. And so there was 6,600 of us on the ship. Pretty big boat.
What kind of ship was it?
Just a big passenger ship, I guess we'd call it. Had many compartments, and it was 8 or 10 guys to a compartment. And I think it took 44 days to go over there.
Wow. Did you have any siblings that was in the service at the same time?
No, I wasn't. My brothers was all older, much older than I was, so they didn't have to worry about that.
Did you farm with your father?
Yeah, well, I had just started farming in 48 on my own, and so yeah, we worked together.
So when you got to Korea, where did you land? Do you remember where you landed?
Yeah, we ended up at Incheon, and there were 8 of us on that ship that was assigned to KMAG. Well, and we've all been through all this infantry school. So we were pretty smart boys, so we figured it was Korean Military Advanced Group. It was Korean Military Advisory Group. While we was up at Incheon, when there was a couple trains, 2 or 3 trains, I can't remember, came in, and those guys got off on one side, our guys got on this side, inside, and they hooked the engine on the front of it, and back they went. It was little bitty short-sided coal cars that they rode in, and so they went north, and us 8 guys still left. We was the last of everything. So about 2:30 or 3:30 in the morning, they got us up, and there was a train waiting for us. And I think it had 8 cars. It was a little Korean passenger train, and it was a narrow gauge, what they call a narrow gauge train. So the tracks weren't very wide apart, and the conditions of the cars was not very good. So we took off, and after a bit I said, I'm always very aware of the directions that I go. So I said to one of the guys with me, I said, we're headed south. So we went to Taegu, which was a long ways from the front. And so they put us in a little transit area. The next day, it was 2 days, we was there 2 days. They come in, they took 7 guys and left me alone. And I was kind of really upset, like not knowing what to do. Well, we was next to Post Engineers, and they had had a rotation party, and they invited all those guys over there. So we had the rotation party. So the next morning, just by chance, I was in the train with this first sergeant over the Post Engineers. Came in, and we was shaving, and I said, Sarge, I said, you got anybody to replace you fellers that went home? Oh, he said, no, I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, well, Sarge, I'm a farm boy. I can drive any of that equipment out there. But little did I think that there was a crane to lift things with, that would be the first one. And of course, I never had been in a crane. Dozers, tractors, trucks, graders, no problem. Well, I was there about a week, and he asked me, he says, really, you think you can get that old crane a running? I said, well, I don't know. Well, one engine, I don't remember if it was in the crane or in the truck. One was gas, and the other was diesel. What a combination. So I went to work, had to get new filters and had batteries and stuff like that. So I got it started, and in about a week after that, he said, well, we've got to go down to the railroad yard and unload, I can't think what kind of kits. There's summer housing kits. And so I said, well, Sarge, how we get down there? He says, I don't know, that's up to you. So I got a guy that could drive the truck, and I drove the crane because the streets was so narrow in the corners that you had to raise your boom and come around, because it didn't collapse back in. It stuck out probably 20 feet in front of the truck. So we went to the railroad yard and got down there before noon, and I think there was 6 or 8 10-wheelers to haul for us. And so of course I had already found out what every knob was, because all the writing was done long before off the knobs. So we got down there, and I unloaded train cars that afternoon. I was a nervous wreck. Didn't have a bit of trouble, but I was slow. So the next morning, about 10, 11 o'clock, I went out to K2 Air Base. There was a big CB outfit at K2, and they brought in a crane operator. I was sure glad to see him. And so he finished that day, and the next day, I think that's when we got down. But all this tropical huts, they called them, I'm pretty sure. They took them out and dumped them in a river bottom. Nobody checked us in, nobody checked us out. I'd say within less than 2.5, 3 weeks, it was all gone. The Koreans had picked her all and got her, took it all. I was very upset about that, but it wasn't much I could do. And so then I was assigned Post Engineers. Had no engineering MOS. Mine was all Army. And so this first sergeant This Colonel Ross come down. They give me a temporary MOS. I can't remember what it was. Well, I had put in every job in Coast Engineers when somebody rotated to come back to States. Well, they give me a temporary MOS. But then when I got ready to come home the next fall, I was taking care of the World Space Heaters. And they froze me for a month till they got somebody over there from the States to take care of the World Space Heaters. So that was kind of the top of my career. I was awful thankful I didn't have to go up on line.
So you said that the first thing you did is fix that crane.
Yeah, that was my first job.
So did you have plenty of supplies?
No, we had to order them all, and our supply sergeant, some of that stuff, he said, we can't get that. I said, well, we've got to have it. And I don't know where or how he got it, but he got it. And so I forgot this was real good, pretty good highlight. One Sunday when I had the grader out, they'd come cleared everything for me to take the grader out and grade the streets in Tegu. So I worked pretty much all day long, and right after lunch, I was going down this street, and I brought gravel up from each side. So I was going right down the middle and spreading this out. And when I come to this intersection, I felt the grader kind of jerk a little bit, and heard something go clink. Well, it broke the tips off of the grader blades. And so then, of course, it left a little streak of dirt down through the gravel, down through the middle. So anyway, I got done that evening. I went back to the compound and went and told the supply sergeant, told the first sergeant what had happened. Well, the first sergeant, it didn't bother him at all, but the supply sergeant said, well, I says, you have to buy them. I think it's $300 or $400 a piece, and there was two of them. I said, well, I don't know about that, Sergeant. So anyway, I made some acquaintance at K2 Air Base. So I had a 3/4 ton truck assigned to me. So next morning I went out to K2 Air Base and looked up my buddy, told him what kind of predicament I was in. Oh, he said, I come down here. He said, I'll take care of that. So I had the number of the grader blades because I knew they had all different kinds of blades. So we went down through the area there, and there was grader blades and everything else stacked along for supplies. So we got down there a little ways, and he said, here, he says, I think this is them. So he got off and checked the numbers, and he said, yeah. He said, how many you want? I said, oh, give me a half a dozen of them. So he threw 6 of them in the back of the truck. And this is kind of how the Army works sometimes. And so he says, is that enough? I said, yeah, that's great, thank you. So I go back to Post Engineers at KMAG headquarters. And I got back there and backed up to the supply room and threw them in through the window. I mean, it was open all. Threw them in through the, well, it wasn't the window, it was the door. So I went up there then. I moved the truck so he couldn't throw them back in. So I went to his office there and I said, Sergeant, I said, there's half a dozen grader blades laying back there, such and such a number. I said, therefore, our grader out there. Where'd you get them, Rio? And I said, well, they're laying back there in your office, in your warehouse there. And I never told him where I got them. And he said, I still going to make you pay for them. I said, well, okay. Well, I never did have to pay for them because he had to accept them. It got him in trouble too, I imagine. So we had plenty of grader blades. And so then from that, there's just first one thing I do and then another. I just Well, it was interesting to me because just every month or so, somebody went home and I took the job over. So.
Now, you said that you had to go into town and you were driving a crane and you really didn't know how to drive a crane.
That's right. That's right.
And you had to make these sharp turns.
You had to raise the crane and bring the boom around so then the truck would pull as far up as good and turn because we were so long. And so then we had to go back. We found a little better route going back, but we still took 2 of us to get it back to the compound. And I was there over about a year or so long after that, and that crane was never started again.
And you had to dump stuff.
Yeah, they dumped these tropical huts out in this river bottom. I think there was 3 train loads, and there was 6 to a car, and I don't know how many, but there was a lot of them, and we had these trucks hauled, and to me it was a mess. I hated to see it, but that's the way things are sometimes.
Did that leave an impression on you, even to this day, of how you tried? I don't know how I want to say this or what I'm trying to explain, but maybe of wastefulness.
Oh yeah, I couldn't understand it because it was close where we dumped these. It was right across this little river from where our post engineers officers compound was, and of course I went out there frequently. And about 2 days after we got done hauling them out there, then I went by there and I looked. I thought, my goodness, they're stealing them tropical huts. But there was nobody there guarding them, and nobody checked us in or nothing. The guys driving the trucks just went out there and dumped them in lines. Yes, it was I was upset, very upset.
Did you, so you never drove that crane again?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it was just a test to see if you could do it?
No, I don't know. But that's the only time I was there close to another year that it was ever called for. And of course, when we got it back in, and when cold weather came, I winterized it and charged the batteries. I took the batteries out and charged them and put them in the supply house so that they would keep better. You know.
So, okay, you just brought up a subject about winter. So what was the weather like over there in Korea?
It was very similar to Illinois here. It got real cold when we had snow, and we didn't have too much wind. I mean, we had wind, but we didn't have too much trouble getting around. I think there was 1 or 2 times I had to take the road grader and go out to the officer's compound and clean. That was important, you know. Those them guys is flying in and out there all the time doing things.
So how did you get your supplies? Were they shipped in by boat? Were they flown in?
Well, most of them was by boat and came into our area in trucks. But sure, there was a lot of supplies coming in every day by plane.
Uh-huh.
But you know what amount of those that came in by plane that we got, I have no way of have any idea what that was. But no, that was, to me, that was a very wasteful situation to see that happen. But it happened. It happened. And then I had a friend that was a colonel in the National Guard, and I talked to him before I joined, and he said, well, surely, he says, I'm not saying we won't, but says, the 44th Division's been called up for about everything. He says, I just kind of don't believe that they'll be called this time. Well, we were, and I'm real proud to have got to go and help what little I helped, because I was thankful I didn't have to go up online and do all that. But then we, after we was there so long, we got, I think, a week or 10 days in Japan, and I got what's called INR, but it was rest and recuperation, and went to Tokyo, and very interesting. Really enjoyed it, and so I had some good time as well as some bad time.
You called it L&R?
R&R.
R&R, okay.
Rest and recuperation.
Okay.
Recuperation, yeah.
Okay. And you got to go to Tokyo.
Uh-huh. That was really something. And while I was walking down the street, and I heard somebody say, "Hey, Rio, what you doing here?" And there's two boys that was in the National Guard with me from Paris, Illinois, from where I was at. So that was kind of pretty good to run on with them.
And where were they stationed at?
They was up on line, but they'd been there long enough. They got to go to Japan.
So you got to spend your R&R with them.
Yeah, we had a lot of, I think that afternoon we buddied together, and then they went on.
So that brings up another subject. Did you, when you went over to Korea, were you stationed with any of your friends from?
No. And there was, I don't remember how many was in the 44th, but of course I was from all over the state of Illinois, so there was a lot of them I didn't know. But no, I wasn't stationed with anybody that I know, other than happening to see this Colonel McDivitt. One morning I pulled out to go to breakfast, and the officers had a small compound across the street, and just as I pulled out on the street, here he come walking out of that compound. So of course I stopped, and by knowing each other in civilian life, so he got in and rode with me over to breakfast, and we had a good conversation. And I don't know, he wasn't there. I think that maybe that day and part of the next day he'd been come down he was up on line, but he came down for instructions or something. And so we had a good time talking to each other.
So how was the food? You talked about going to breakfast. How was the food?
Well, it was Army food, but it wasn't too bad. I never had to pull KP or anything, so that was the good part. But no, the food it wasn't too awful bad. It wasn't too bad. We didn't have to eat K rations over there. Well, now we ate K rations on board boat of the ship. I don't remember why, because we ate in the dining room, and all at once we went to eating K rations. So some things you didn't find out, you just took it, went on.
What about your uniforms? How many uniforms did you have?
Well, I really don't remember. I think we had Class A, and then our fatigues, I think I had 3 sets of fatigues, and then we just take them out. There were people all up and down, Korean ladies all up and down the street to do your laundry and press your clothes. And I always watched them, seeing if they had a tub or something, so they'd do the laundry there at their house or whatever, instead of taking them to the river and a stick and a rock and beating them to clean them. That's the way. And of course they had soap they put on it, but you would think after all the years that, but I mean, there were some people, some of the ladies that would use wash tubs, and they'd build an open fire to heat water. So that's the ones that I would always try to let them have my clothes done at. But they pressed the clothes, they made them nice. Yeah.
Did you live in Quonset huts in Korea?
Yeah, we had Quonset huts. There was 8 in the little area that we was in, and I think there was about 12 in the next, and then in the front of the Quonset, why there was just the first sergeant and one other. There was just 2 up there. And then we, of course, we had to pull CQ over there, charge of quarters on weekends, and take care of just everyday business, like if we had something we couldn't handle, well, we'd have to find a first sergeant. Sometimes that wasn't easy. He was gone.
Now, were you over there for any holidays?
Oh yeah, I was over there for, let's see, I went in April of '92 and come home in October of '93. So I was there one Christmas, 4th of July, two 4th of Julys. Yeah, we celebrated. And Christmas, well, there was an orphanage, Catholic orphanage. This is pretty interesting. And we take our scrap lumber out there for them to use to burn. Well, one evening, one of my friends there, we were going up to another compound, and they had a gymnasium that was lit, and we was going to play basketball. So we was walking up the street, and we heard a baby cry. So we had flashlights, so we turned, and here this little baby was wrapped in a GI blanket laying alongside the street. When we seen that GI blanket, we knew that the baby was being discarded. So we picked it up and went back down to the compound, got a hold of the first sergeant, and so he said, well, let's take it out to the orphanage. So first sergeant and this other man, I can't remember who the friend who was going to shoot basketball. So anyway, we jumped in a Jeep and went to this orphanage, and they took this little baby right in and started taking, well, first we took it back to our compound, and we didn't know what to do for a little bit, so we had Hershey bars, so it wasn't probably over 4 months old. So we put them Hershey bars up to its little lips, and boy, it just smacked them and go at that chocolate. So then we took it out to the orphanage, and these nuns was very nice. Of course, we knowed them, and they knowed us. But it was about 8 o'clock at night, and everything out there was shut down too. And it took a good while to get anybody to come answer the gate, because they was afraid that something might not be right. It was unusual, so anyway, they come and they took the little baby in, and they said, well, what's its name? It's Magnus. And I said, it don't have no name. First, we've got to have a name to put on it. And he said to me, he says, what name do you like? I said, well, I like Mary real good. I have a sister named Mary. And so then this man said to Sergeant Magnus, says, what's your name? He said, Sergeant Magnus. And they said, well, name her Mary Magnus. And she said, what's your name, sir? I said, Real, and so the baby's name come out Mary Magnus Real. And I thought, I don't want to leave my name over here. So, of course, I kept track of her through that winter. And, well, it took her, and I come home in October, and she was still all right in October, but she died with the measles the next spring. And some of my buddies let me know that was still there. So that was kind of an experience, but the GI blanket, we knowed what it was when we seen that. Sad, like sad. There was a lot of it. And so I had a lot of good, interesting things in life remembrance to remember from spending the 16 months, whatever it was over there.
Did you stay in touch with any of your friends from over there?
I did for a few years, but then a couple of them passed away, and then one of them down in Texas that we even went to see, and they come up, and he was sick. He got sick, and we don't know whether he passed away or not. We wrote Christmas cards, but we never heard no more. So. No, that's it. And then I have one, a man named Bradley Baker. He was from down in Kentucky. He was only 16. He was over there. He lied about his age and signed everything. Well, his mother was dying, and so the Red Cross got a hold of it, and man, they shipped him back to the States real quick. So we kept in contact, kept letters going, you know. So they sent us a letter or call and said, we're coming through Paris, Illinois on a trip, such and such time. Said, we'd like to come by your house. So they had two little girls, and we had just had our first one. So they come by, and they just come by just to see us. They stayed 10 days. So our relationship there was real good, and then he come down with MS and was that way for 15 years or so. But finally he passed, and his wife was still alive last year. I need to write her a note or something, but I'm not very good shape myself. So. But yes, we had some real friendship.
Did you keep like a personal diary or anything?
Oh, some, yeah. Anything really different to me, I kept that down while I was over there. But then come back to this, back when I come back home, I of course let it just probably in a drawer someplace.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
Letters. Yeah. There was no cell phones or anything back then. And then of course the orphans out there, I belong to the United Brethren Church, and well, about every church, if somebody, they sent tons and tons of clothes. And so those little kids all had decent clothes. There was probably 150 of them, and there was one little girl that was Irish or something. Anyway, she was blonde-headed and blue-eyed, and the rest of them kids over there did not like her at all. She was really shunned. Just when she was about 3 years old, just to me, just as cute as she could be. I mean, them other little Korean kids, I thought they was cute. You know, I mean, she was Caucasian. And we'd always be sure to, I reckon, kind of pamper her. We'd have something kind of special for her. And we went out there about every Saturday morning with this wood and stuff. And of course, after we started kind of getting special stuff for her, she was usually pretty close to the gate looking for us.
Did any of those kids get adopted by the soldiers?
Not that we know of, no, never. But it was a very well run. I was surprised that the Catholic Church was still able to have that much to do with orphanages, and they had kids up 10, 12 years old. But they would teach these kids how to work, and when they left the orphanage, they usually was able to find something to do so that they could survive. And, or some family would let them move in with them. That was one thing that was going on over there back in 1951 and 53. So,
Did you have any entertainers come over there to visit you?
oh yeah, we had entertainers every, I'd say at least once a month. We'd have some not big name, but somebody, you know. But see, our unit was not too big. We had probably, in the whole unit, probably 200-300 people. But now there was twice that, I think it's twice, went out to K2 Air Base, and they had some big name entertainer out there. But no, we had some, but not a whole lot. Well, there just wasn't too many of them.
Do you remember any that you saw?
No, I don't remember.
You didn't get to see Marilyn Monroe,
No, we wasn't lucky to see nobody that good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yeah, pretty much.
Where were you at?
Camp Carson, Colorado. That's where I got turned loose. And I was there about a week or two. So, of course, I didn't have no transportation, so I called home, got some money, and went and bought me a car. And so I had the wheels pretty quick. And of course, I'd met some guys. I think there's 3 of them from Illinois wanted to ride back to Illinois with me. So they bought the gas, and I brought them back to Illinois. There's on the west side of Illinois. And
What kind of car did you buy?
Plymouth, a 1951 Plymouth. It had 37,000 on it, and so I got it home. And of course, when you're gone that long, all your girlfriends are gone too when you get back. So I met my wife. Her sister was working at a feed store, secretary at a feed store. And so one day usually my dad would take the corn to town to get shelled and ground for hog feed. And one day, I don't remember, he couldn't go, so I took it in, went in to get the tickets and everything, and I seen this gal, and I thought, "Whoa, where's she come from?" So talked to the boys in the back there, and they told me her name was Eve. And so she's going steady. So it didn't bother me. I found out her phone number, and I called her that night. She said, "Well, I'm going steady, but said I've got a sister." Of course, the guys in the back, they told me about her sister, So that was the first week of September. Anyway, the first date was on the 8th of September of 1954, and we got married February the 18th of 1955. And we was married 56 years before she passed away, so we had a wonderful marriage. We had 2 children, and had a wonderful marriage. And but I thought that was kind of pretty quick, and everybody wanted to know why we got married. So I said, well, we just decided that's the way to do it. But it took us 9 years before we had any babies.
So when you got out of the service, you started farming again.
Yeah.
And is that what you did all the rest of your life?
Done it for 50 years.
You farmed for 50 years.
Of course, when I come back, I wasn't able to hold on to rented ground, so I had to get out and find me some ground to rent. And I found 3 patches, one was a 60, and then 30 or 27, and then about a 20. And of course, back then, I mean, your equipment was small, and you just didn't have much to do with. But it changed over the years very, very much. And well, I farmed for 50 years, and had some success. So thankful for that.
Did you ever attend any reunions, military reunions?
Yeah, we had National Guard reunions. We had some of them.
Mm-hmm.
But last one they had, I wasn't physically able to go. But they're still having some reunions yet today. But we're not able to participate anymore.
What about veterans organizations? Do you belong to any veterans organizations?
Yeah, I belong to the American Legion and the VFW. And the VFW does a lot of wonderful things, and also the American Legion. I had one friend who was in service together, and he got wounded real bad. He come over about 3 weeks after I got to Korea, and he went up online, and he went through a minefield and turned the flags. They had a little white on one side and black on the other, so you turn them white, so when you went through, you come back, you see them. Well, somebody came back through and turned the flags, and he got a mountain bed, and he wore a catheter for 50-some years before he passed away. And that was always pretty, because he and I was on 75 recorders guns in Camp Cook, and they'd set an old car out there 400 or 500 yards, and him and I we'd knock the front post out, we'd knock the back post out, and then we'd knock the middle and drop the top of the car. And we got to go, I think it was 3 weekends up and down the West Coast out there. They took us to far for some of these generals and to do stuff. And then Lee Hamilton was his name, and he come over. I was pulling CQ, charge of orders, and got this order that anybody want to go to the FECOM area, well, it's Far East Command, but it's Korea, to sign up. Well, when I turned my papers in, I had 30-some names. My name was first, Lee Hamilton was second. And we was packed and ready to go, and we went to eat, had to wait about 10 minutes to eat dinner before we left. And they come and took him off orders while we was eating dinner. And he had waited, he was probably, maybe a month and a half. Well, he had 30 days to come home. So it was probably 60 days. And he got shipped over there, and he wasn't there but, I think, 3 weeks, and stepped into that minefield. So that's a pretty sad memory. Because why? I was first my name was first, and he was second, and we was packed, ready to go, and they come and took him off orders. That'll make you think. That'll make you think.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Oh, I'm proud of our country, but I sure think we've made a lot of terrible mistakes in the last 60 years. Really, the last war we had was the Second World War. And I think now it's all political and money and things of that nature that I don't understand. I think I understand part of it, but to me, it's pretty bad deal. I think we've hit on about all the highlights that I can remember. To me, it was interesting.
Do you remember any of your medals you received?
No, I don't. I've got, there's someplace down there, but yeah, I had, I think, about 12 medals.
Well, at this time, I would like to say thank you for serving our country, and I would also like to thank you for allowing me the time to interview you and the honor of being the one to interview you.
Well, I thank you very much. I'm proud to have been a part of something that is greater than a few people can do.